You remember the moment, not as a clear story, but as a feeling, a shift, a quiet, irreversible click somewhere deep inside you. Maybe it was the night you saw your mother crying in the kitchen, trying to hide it, but failing. Or the way your father's anger filled the room like a storm you couldn't escape. Maybe it wasn't loud at all. Maybe it was silence. Heavy, suffocating silence from someone who was supposed to be there, but wasn't. And in that moment, something ancient awakened in you. You didn't say it out loud. You didn't even have the words for it, but your body understood. If I don't hold this together, no one will. So you got quieter, more alert, more careful. You started watching everything. The tone of a voice, the sound of footsteps, the way a door closed. You learned to anticipate problems before they happened. You learned to shrink, to adjust, to become whatever the moment needed you to be. Because chaos wasn't just uncomfortable, it felt dangerous. And no one came to tell you, you don't have to do this. No one stepped in and said, you're just a child, so you stopped being one. The world might look at that version of you now and call it strength, responsibility, maturity. But what they don't see is this. That wasn't growth, that was survival. And the most painful part, you didn't just learn how to take care of everything, you learned far too early that no one was coming to take care of you. People noticed you early on. They saw how quiet you were, how well behaved, how you never caused trouble, never demanded too much, never made things harder than they already were. And they smiled at you with admiration, tilting their heads slightly as they said it. You're so mature for your age. You're such an old soul. You're so responsible. And at first it felt good, because it was the only kind of validation you received. No one praised your joy. No one celebrated your curiosity, your messiness, your neediness. But they noticed your control, your composure, your ability to hold yourself together when everything around you was falling apart. So you leaned into it. You became the good child, the easy one, the one who didn't need anything. But here's what no one told you. That wasn't maturity. That was adaptation. That was a child learning in real time that having needs was inconvenient, maybe even dangerous, that expressing emotions could make things worse, that the safest way to exist was to take up as little space as possible. So you didn't grow up, you adjusted, you edited yourself, silenced parts of you, smoothed out your edges until you became someone who was easy to handle, easy to praise, easy to ignore, and the world rewarded you for it. But underneath that calm, composed exterior was not a wise, grounded child. It was a child who had been left alone with too much responsibility, and no one who thought to ask what it was costing them. There's a word for what happened to you, a clinical, almost sterile word that doesn't fully capture the weight of it. Parentification. It was first introduced by psychiatrist Ivan Bossomeni-Nagy, but you didn't need a definition to live it. You felt it every day. Parentification is what happens when the roles in a family quietly but completely reverse. When the child is no longer the one being cared for, but becomes the one doing the caring. There are two forms this can take. The first is instrumental parentification, the visible kind. This is where you became the functional adult in the household, cooking meals when no one else could, making sure your siblings were fed, dressed, and got to school, handling responsibilities that were far beyond your age. You were praised for being capable, reliable, so helpful. But behind that competence was a constant, low-level fear, because you knew if you dropped the ball, everything might fall apart. The second form is far quieter and far more damaging, emotional parentification. This is when you became the emotional support system for the very people who were supposed to support you. You listened to problems you were too young to understand. You absorbed feelings that weren't yours to carry. You became the mediator, the peacekeeper, the silent container for chaos. You learned to read the room instantly, to adjust your tone, your behavior, your presence, just to keep things from escalating. And here's the part that's hardest to see. You didn't question it, because to you, this was love. Being needed meant being valued. Carrying the weight meant you mattered. So you kept doing it. Not because you were strong, but because somewhere deep inside, you believed that if you stopped, you might lose the only connection you had. You didn't walk into a room like other children did. You scanned it. Before you said a word, before you even fully stepped inside, your body was already collecting data. The weight of the silence, the tension in the air, the way a chair was pushed back just a little too hard, the sound of footsteps, fast or slow, heavy or controlled. You learned to read the room before you learned to read yourself. Was it safe to speak? Was it better to stay quiet? Was today a good day or a dangerous one? This wasn't a conscious decision. It was automatic. Your nervous system adapted to an unpredictable environment by becoming hyper-aware, always alert, always prepared. Because in your world, small signals meant everything. A sigh could mean an argument was coming. A slammed door could mean you needed to disappear. A shift in tone could mean you had to change who you were, instantly. So you did. You became flexible, adjustable, invisible when necessary. You learned to shrink, to soften, to anticipate, not because you were naturally intuitive, but because you had to be. And over time, this constant scanning rewired something deep inside you. Your body stopped knowing how to relax. Even in quiet moments, there was a subtle tension, like something might go wrong at any second. You weren't just observing your environment, you were managing it, trying to prevent explosions before they happened, trying to keep everything stable, even when it wasn't your job to do so. You didn't have a childhood. You had a role, and that role was to make sure everything and everyone didn't fall apart. At some point, survival stopped looking like struggle and started looking like strength. You became the one who could handle everything, the reliable one, the composed one, the one people pointed to and said, they've got it together. And slowly, without even realizing it, you built what psychologists often call the mask of competence. From the outside, it looked impressive. You were disciplined, responsible, high-functioning, maybe even successful. But underneath that mask, something else was happening. You were learning a dangerous equation. My worth is equal to what I can do for others. So you pushed yourself harder. You became perfect, or at least tried to be. Not because you wanted excellence, but because you feared collapse. Because somewhere deep inside, you believed that if you stopped performing, everything, including your place in the world, might disappear. And in the process, you committed a quiet, invisible loss. You abandoned yourself. Your needs became secondary, then irrelevant. Your emotions became inconvenient, then inaccessible. Your desires, you stopped asking, because no one had ever shown you that you were allowed to have them. So instead, you became whoever the moment required. A chameleon, a problem solver, a stabilizer in every room you entered. And here's the part that hurts the most. You didn't just lose your childhood, you lost the blueprint of who you were supposed to become. Because identity isn't something you're born with. It's something you discover through play, through mistakes, through being seen and accepted as you are. But you never had the space for that. You were too busy becoming who everyone else needed. And now, beneath all that competence, there's a quiet question that lingers. If I'm not useful, then who am I? There's something you carry that no one ever taught you to name. It doesn't show up in obvious ways. It doesn't scream or demand attention. In fact, most people would never notice it at all. But it quietly shapes how you see yourself and how you move through the world. Shame. Not the kind that comes from doing something wrong, but the kind that forms when your needs were ignored, dismissed, or treated like a problem. When you reached out and no one reached back. When you felt something deeply and learned that it made things worse. So your mind tried to make sense of it. And the only conclusion that felt safe enough to hold was this: it must be me. I'm too much. I'm too sensitive. I shouldn't need this. Over time, that belief didn't just stay in your thoughts, it became your identity. So now, even as an adult, it follows you in subtle ways. You hesitate before asking for help. You over-explain when you set a boundary. You apologize for things that don't require an apology. And when you finally slow down, when you try to rest, to take care of yourself, to choose your own needs, that feeling creeps in. Guilt, discomfort, a quiet voice questioning whether you're allowed to take up space at all. As if existing without being useful is somehow wrong. And the most difficult part is this. You don't recognize it as shame. It feels like truth. It feels like who you are, but it isn't. It's the emotional residue of a childhood where your needs were never held. And now, every time you begin to show up for yourself, that old voice rises again, gently pulling you back into silence. You would think that once the chaos is gone, everything would finally feel different. No more tension hanging in the air, no more waiting for the next argument, no more walking into a room and immediately bracing yourself. Just quiet, just stability. But when that moment finally comes, something doesn't feel right. Instead of relief, you feel restless, uneasy, almost on edge, like you're forgetting something important. Because for you, peace doesn't feel like safety. It feels unfamiliar. And what's unfamiliar to your nervous system often feels like a threat. You grew up in an environment where calm was temporary, where silence didn't mean safety, it meant something was about to happen. Where your body had to stay alert, constantly scanning for subtle shifts, preparing for impact before it arrived. So your system adapted. It learned to live in a state of readiness, to stay slightly tense, slightly vigilant, always prepared to fix, respond, or protect. And now, even when there is nothing wrong, your body doesn't know how to stand down. You sit in a quiet space and your mind starts searching for problems. You have time to rest and suddenly you feel guilty. You try to relax, but your body stays tight, like it's waiting for something to break. Because stress became your baseline. You are wired for survival, not for stillness. So when life slows down, your system misreads peace as danger. And this is the paradox that confuses so many people. The safety you always needed is the very thing your body has never learned how to trust. When it comes to love, you don't choose what is healthy. You choose what feels familiar. And for you, love was never something that felt calm, safe, or consistent. It was something unstable, something you had to manage carefully, something you had to earn through effort, patience, and self-sacrifice. So when you step into relationships as an adult, you're not just looking for connection, you're looking for something to fix. Someone who is distant, someone emotionally unavailable, someone who pulls you in then pushes you away, someone who makes you question where you stand. Because that emotional pattern feels like home. There's a name for this: trauma bonding. It's not just attachment, it's a cycle. A loop where moments of closeness are followed by withdrawal, where affection feels unpredictable, and where your nervous system becomes hooked on trying to restore connection. And every time that connection breaks, something deep inside you activates. Try harder. Be more understanding. Don't let this fall apart. So you give more. You tolerate more. You stay longer than you should. Not because you don't see the problem, but because part of you believes this is what love requires. That if you can just hold on, just prove your loyalty, just fix what's broken, you will finally receive the love you were denied before. But the truth is, you're not falling in love. You're repeating a pattern. Because real love doesn't feel like anxiety. It doesn't require constant effort to maintain connection. It doesn't ask you to abandon yourself just to keep someone close. And yet, you keep choosing the same dynamic. Not because you're weak, but because your heart is still trying to recreate something familiar, in the hope that this time it will finally end differently. There comes a moment when everything finally slows down. No one needs you, no crisis to manage, no problem to solve. And instead of relief, you feel something else. Emptiness. Not a dramatic kind, not overwhelming, just a quiet, unsettling absence, like something is missing, but you can't quite name what it is, because for most of your life, your identity was built around being needed, around being useful, around showing up for everyone else. You knew who to be in every situation, the helper, the fixer, the strong one. But when those roles fall away, there's nothing solid underneath. You sit with yourself and realize you don't really know what you like. You don't know what you want. You don't even know how you feel unless it's about someone else. Because no one ever asked you those questions growing up. And even if they had, you wouldn't have known how to answer. You were too busy adapting, too busy surviving, too busy becoming who the moment required you to be. So now, in the absence of pressure, you feel lost, not because you lack depth, but because you were never given the space to discover it. And this is the quiet truth that's hardest to face. You built a life. You became responsible, capable, reliable, but you never got the chance to build a self. So when you're finally alone, without a role to play, you're left with a question that feels both simple and terrifying. Who am I if I'm not needed? Healing doesn't begin with becoming stronger. It begins with allowing yourself to feel what you were never allowed to feel. Grief, not just for what happened, but for what never did. The safety you didn't have, the comfort you didn't receive, the childhood you had to trade for survival. And that grief can be heavy, uncomfortable, even confusing, because part of you still believes you shouldn't feel this way, that you should just move on. Be grateful, stay strong, but healing asks you to do the opposite. It asks you to be honest, to sit with that younger version of you, the one who had to grow up too fast, and finally say, you didn't deserve that, and it wasn't your fault. This is where reparenting begins. In the small, quiet moments, when anxiety rises and instead of pushing it away, you pause and remind yourself, you are safe now. You don't have to carry everything anymore. And it won't feel natural at first. Setting boundaries will feel wrong. Saying no will trigger guilt. Choosing yourself will feel unfamiliar, even selfish. Let it, because that discomfort isn't failure. It's evidence that something inside you is changing. Healing is not about becoming someone new. It's about slowly uncovering the person you never got to be. Learning what you like, what you need, what brings you peace. Not because it's useful, but because it's yours. And maybe, for the first time, you begin to understand this. You don't have to earn love. You are allowed to exist as you are. If this video spoke to something deep inside you, consider subscribing to the channel. We explore the quiet, often invisible struggles people carry, and you're not alone in this. And if you're ready, share your story in the comments. The moment you realized you had to grow up too fast might help someone else feel seen too. Thank you for watching.